Hi, and welcome to our presentation on understanding and supporting families with experiences of ADHD. We are the Portsmouth 0 to 19 Neurodiversity team. Thank you for attending our presentation today. My name's Georgia and I'm a neurodiversity practitioner within the team, and I am joined by
Anna, and I'm also a neurodiversity practitioner within the team.
We have an agenda for today's presentation. We are going to be looking at what is ADHD, as this is quite important, challenges of ADHD that your young people might experience, as well as the experiences of the family, strengths associated with ADHD. We have some strategies that we hope you can take away from today. We will also be covering sleep, as we know this is a large area associated with ADHD, some services for support, and there will also be an opportunity for you to leave some feedback.
Okay, so let's get started, and we'll start with that initial question: what is ADHD? For many of you, you've come on a long journey to reach this point of diagnosis, and we'll have very different stories from each other to sort of tell and how ADHD impacts on your young person's lives and that of the family. But with medical and diagnostic definition in mind, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a common and chronic neurodevelopmental disorder that affects a person's ability to focus their attention, regulate their activity levels, and control their impulses. And this occurs across the lifespan, though the impact will look different for every individual. There are three main types of ADHD, and you might well be aware of this, having your young person be diagnosed. So ADHD combined is the most common condition, and this is when a child has difficulties with their impulses and hyperactivity levels, and they also have trouble paying attention and can be easily distracted. ADHD impulsive or hyperactive subtype is when the difficulties are mainly impacted on their levels of energy, that hyperactivity that we might see, or those impulsive decisions that they might make, but they don't necessarily have the same difficulty paying attention. And then we have the inattentive subtype, which used to be known as ADD, attention deficit disorder, and a child with this type is mostly inattentive and easily distracted.
We are now going to look into each of those areas in a lot more detail. I am sure that many of you as parents will be able to resonate with a lot of the things we're going to talk about today. So we are going to start off with looking at inattention. So inattention is often categorised by seeming not to learn from mistakes or making careless mistakes. This is more seen at school, but can also be seen at home. So if you're doing, reading or homework, your child or young person might be skipping sentences or getting lost on what question they were on, or they might be rushing the task, so you constantly having to scribble out and ask them to redo it. Appearing forgetful, often losing things. So some of your children and young people might often lose their school tie, their shoes, their bottle, their PE kit. And our older teens tend to lose some quite really important things like their passport, cards, house key. Having difficulty organising tasks and time. So it can be really difficult, as they get older and more independent. And you might find that as a parent, you're having to make sure that you're there to say, okay, you've got to get up now, make sure you're dressed, come on, you're running late, and help them with that organisation and making sure they have everything they need to start the day. Being unable to stick to tasks that are boring or time consuming. So they may find that if they like English homework is really easy for them and they like that, whereas other tasks like science homework may be really daunting because that's not something that interests them, or something like washing up or doing the laundry. Constantly changing from one activity to another. So again, take reading for example, they may be switching between books or go from doing maths homework to watching the TV to doing some Lego. And having a short attention span and being easily distracted. So you might notice that they zone out in conversation, or they're daydreaming, or they're looking out the window, those sorts of things. In terms of our hyperactive children, the most common thing we tend to see, especially in boys, is being unable to sit still. This may be even when they're trying to sit still, they might be bouncing their leg, moving side to side, getting up, pacing, excessive physical movement. So they might be the ones that on the walk to school, they're climbing up the neighbour's fence or climbing up trees and constantly looking for movement opportunities. We often see excessive talking, so it can feel a bit like verbal diarrhea. They might come home from school and be so excited to tell you about your day. They'll talk at you for about 2 hours without you being able to get a word in edgeways. Excessive fidgeting, so fidgeting can be anything from actual using fidget objects, so picking at nails or twirling hair, being unable to concentrate on activities because they're moving so much, struggling in situations where there is an expectation to be calm or quiet. So you might find that when you take them to a friend's house, they're being quite loud, they're banging around when they're running up and down the stairs. Or, if you go to church or another setting where it's expected to be quiet, they're not able to sit still. It is really important, hyperactivity, that we know it can be more discreet and internally. So a lot of our children and young people say that they get racing thoughts. They feel that their mind is never quiet and they find it really difficult to relax. They can't just sit there and read a book. They can't sit there and watch a film. They've constantly got to be doing something. So impulsivity, we seem to see in this area showing little or no sense of hindsight or foresight. So this is often categorized by risk-taking behaviors. This may be them walking into the road without looking, pinching their sibling without thinking of the consequences, interrupting even if they mean well. So often, at school, they may be really excited because they know the answer, but they're answering before the teacher even finishes their sentence. Acting without thinking, whether this is ill-intentioned or not. So it could be anything from throwing things to jumping off something. And again, we've already talked about seeming to show little or no sense of danger and being unable to wait their turn. So things like family board games can be really difficult because they always want to go first. Or if you plan a nice family trip to a theme park, it can be really difficult for them to be able to sit there without fidgeting, walking off, or running up and down the queue.
And as well as all those perhaps more obvious traits, there are some subtle traits that can go unnoticed. And we're starting to see this more with females where it's not so overt and the behaviour is not such a strong presentation. So subtle traits might include trouble maintaining friendships, and that can be due to sort of impulsivity levels, maybe talking over others and that other people finding that more annoying and not really understanding why it's happening. Daydreaming quietly in class, that can often go under the radar, or teachers are not likely to notice because they have a class of 30 that they're managing. So that daydreaming can actually mean that the young person zoned out of what's being discussed, and that's actually sort of missing instructions or missing their learning. The term scatterbrain is kind of an endearing term, but it's often used when someone appears quite disorganized or they're just a scatterbrain. They're known for that. They're known for forgetting things or losing their belongings. And it can be quite joked about. Being a perfectionist, so often a person with ADHD wants to get things right, and that can bring with it that impact on mental health because they want to get things right but are struggling to do that at the same time. You might see things like hair twirling or picking at cuticles, nails or skin, and there's those discrete movements that would often go unnoticed. Excessive chatting, as Georgia said previously, so having lots to share and maybe not picking up when someone's not interested or not listening. Feeling anxious or sad, a lot of these feelings from ADHD can be internalized, and worry can take place and anxiety about situations, say they're feeling that they're falling behind in their learning or that others have a certain opinion of them. Exhibiting silliness, perhaps being known as the class clown and impressing others, but could actually be an avoidance tactic of saying, actually, I'm not coping this situation. I don't understand what I have to do. I can't sit still. I can't concentrate. So instead, if I do something that draws attention to another aspect of myself, then people won't notice. Appearing shy and trying not to be noticed. So again, going under that radar and then seeming not to pay attention. In that way, people might just leave you alone. A sense of time blindness, so for things like deadlines for homework or appointments or meeting friends, and not really having an awareness of how much time you need to get ready or how much time it will take you to get out of the door and meet up with friends in a certain location. So just having that lack of concept. Some things can seem like it takes forever, and some things can appear to fly by in a flash. Rejection sensitivity. So often young people have reported that they're very sensitive to tone of voice if they feel someone's unhappy with them or they feel they've upset somebody. And even when that's not necessarily the case, it can become so sort of concentrated on that they feel that they are being rejected without reason. And that fear of being judged again. So what are people thinking of me? How am I coming across? And that can lead to lots of overthinking in those areas. Along with ADHD, there are huge strengths that occur and some famous people that have ADHD and have really kind of gone far in their lives. And that can be down to a number of things. That sense of humour that kind of gets you out of tricky situations. But the persistence, I think, is really key, and that having that resilience to keep going even when you're faced with lots of barriers and hurdles to get through. Being adaptable, so being able to change the way you might look at something and not maybe follow the same pathway as neurotypical people. Being spontaneous, so not having the need to plan ahead can give you a sense of freedom, really, because you can just get up and go if you feel the need or you have an idea that springs to your mind. Creativity is great because you tend to see something that's outside of the box. And being willing to take risks, while it can be an area of difficulty, it can also be a good sort of pathway to go down within reasonable sort of adjustments, and willing to take risks, because sometimes if you don't do that, you'll never know. Energetic, so high energy levels are going to take you far in life. It is important to monitor that because you can get to a point where actually your energy levels are just exhausted. But being energetic, lots of people would want that sort of drive to get things done. And also being able to hyperfocus. So when you find something that really interests you and that you really feel passionate about, you can fixate on that for a certain amount of time in order to get a job done. There are lots of co-occurring conditions that come along with ADHD, or ADHD can be diagnosed alone. Other things that are related quite closely are oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. And that can be as a result of untreated ADHD, where the needs are not being met and not recognised. Anxiety disorder, as we discussed earlier, the impact on mental health is clear for someone with ADHD if they feel misunderstood or they don't quite understand themselves and why they may see things differently. Obsessive compulsive disorder, that urge to do things, carry out rituals in case something bad happens. And autism spectrum disorder. So it used to be the case that ADHD and autism spectrum disorder were not diagnosed together, but there is a huge overlap in sort of presentations. And now I think it's up to about 50 to 70% of people with ADHD also have autism and vice versa. You can also have developmental disorders like global developmental delay, language and reading delays, coordination motor delays, which sometimes are called things like dyspraxia. And then we have tics and Tourette syndrome and additional sleep problems. So as I said, they can occur together, but they also just can be in isolation.
We know that with ADHD, we are still learning as a society, and therefore, unfortunately, sometimes a lot of the traits that come with ADHD are misunderstood. So we've got a few examples that we're going to go through today. So someone with ADHD might not be able to wait to speak and then might butt into conversations. And often we know that this is seen as them being rude or arrogant, or that they're not showing an interest in the other person. Whereas actually they're really interested, they want to engage in that conversation, and they know that if they don't say it then and there, they're going to forget it. Again, fidgeting and moving while talking is often seen as someone's lacking in control, or again, that they're not interested. However, the one thing that keeps someone with ADHD, especially the hyperactive type focused, is movement, and they need that to be able to regulate. So they want to be able to engage, and they do that by moving. Being quite forgetful. This is often seen as someone being low intelligence or just being, silly or stupid, where actually they're going to feel really upset, especially if it's something of great importance, you know, like their house key and then they're stood outside for ages, or a family heirloom or something like that that they've lost. And not paying attention or getting easily distracted. Again, this is saying that the person with ADHD doesn't care and that they're not paying attention in their work. Whereas actually, again, they're probably more upset about it than we are. And they don't want, you know, the limelight being on them or someone pulling them up. As we know, often in schools, you know, they might go, oh, are you listening? Or what did I just say? Another thing that goes hand in hand with ADHD is executive functioning. Now, put simply, executive functions are processes that happen in our brain to help us plan and organise what we have to do. They are a wonderful series of processes that help us to control our attention, our impulses, and our emotions. As we have already covered, if you have ADHD, this can be a significant difficulty. Another thing our executive functions help us with is about retrieving information from our memory, being able to organise this information, and being able to self-monitor ourselves so we can actually use this information constructively. I'm now going to go through a few ways in which executive functioning and ADHD can have its challenges. So here we have got impulse control. So someone with ADHD may not have the ability to pause and think before acting. And it actually, you know, without this, it doesn't help us to resist impulses and avoid inappropriate behaviours. So someone with ADHD hasn't got that, so they do act on impulses. So the next one is around cognitive flexibility, which we are over here. So this is about our ability to adapt to new situations, switch between tasks, and think about multiple concepts simultaneously. So someone with ADHD may not be able to do more than one task at once and go back and forth. They may not be able to adapt to new situations. So if, say, for example, someone changes what time they need to be at work or changes the time of an exam, they'll find it really hard to make sure that they get there on time. Okay, our emotional control, and we hear this a lot from you guys as parents. We know that, you know, if you've got good executive functioning skills, you're able to manage emotions effectively to be able to achieve goals, complete tasks, and control your behaviour. Whereas someone with ADHD, normally they don't have good emotional control and they struggle to regulate their emotions. So they may find, you know, starting tasks, especially tasks that they find difficult, quite hard because they don't want to fail. Okay, so over here we've got our task initiation. That's about, you know, the person may have to begin a task and know how to approach that task. Whereas if you've got ADHD, it can be really hard to know where to start. Up here we've got our working memory, so that's about holding and manipulating information in mind over short periods. Whereas, as we know, with a lot of our ADHD children, what gets said a lot is it feels that it goes in one ear and out the other. Okay, so planning, organising and setting goals, being able to set goals and stick to them. A lot of our ADHD children tend to do things really last minute, and actually sometimes that works for them because they can't manage longer term goals because they don't know what to do when and how to break down those tasks. And then organisation, so down here, that goes into it a lot. So being able to keep track of items and information, and this really impacts on school and when you go to adulthood, work and bits like that. And self-monitoring, being able to know our performance and behaviour in real time. So a lot of our ADHD young people might feel bad after they've been impulsive, but they can't control that in that given moment.
So one of the strategies we would probably suggest, especially to support with executive functioning, is to break tasks down. And you probably may well do that quite naturally as you've adapted to what they need in the moment. So as young children become teenagers and they transition to secondary school, the expectations around them are much higher, and that need for independence and organising themselves goes along with that. But that's where people with ADHD can really struggle. So breaking things down into an order of when they need to be done can help prioritise tasks and figure out where to start. So we could try using sort of a matrix or a grid, and perhaps listing all the tasks and then deciding that first, are they important and urgent? In that case, then we need to do it now, so there's no stalling. Then if it's not important, but it is urgent, we could delegate someone else to help or even do it for us. So if we know our strengths are not for that task, but we know someone that is very good at that, then what is the harm in asking for help or asking someone to take that on for you? If the task is important, but it's not urgent, then perhaps schedule a time to do that. And you could do that using a calendar, using an alarm on your phone, and just as a reminder for that time where you could undertake the task. And then finally, if it's not important and not urgent, then just bin it, because you're probably never going to do it in the first place, and it's not going to have an impact on your life, whether it is done or it isn't. So that's just one way of perhaps supporting with executive functioning. Another more of a behaviour strategy is something called MVR baskets, and that comes from non-violent resistance course that you can find out more about on the Family Assist website, which we will share later at the end of the presentation. So this is about categorising some of the behavioural presentations that you're managing at a certain time. And what's advised is to make a list of all of the things that kind of sort of causing disharmony within the family or causing a problem and a breakdown in relationships. And then looking at those behaviours or those presentations and deciding for the moment, what can you actually ignore? What is not having such an impact on your daily life? Put those all into the ignore basket. Then there'll be a middle section where perhaps, yes, they are important to you, but they're things that you can negotiate on for the time being. So, okay, perhaps a young person is not willing to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. Could you just negotiate on that and say, give them a half hour, but then they need to, or longer at the weekend, something like that. And then you've got your priority behaviours that really would only be focusing on one or two things that are happening at the current time. So these are the things that you really want to make changes about, and they will be your focus, whereas the rest will be put to one side for the moment. And it's probably to pick on something that is affecting both you and your child's relationship and how you're functioning day to day. So it could be something like, okay, I want them to sort of organise themselves for school. This might not be a priority behaviour, but it might be something that you're needing them to do because you're not around in the mornings. So then you can sit with your child, work out ways of really focusing on that with strategies to support, such as lists or post-it notes or reminders, that kind of thing. And then really focusing on that priority and recognising when the child is reaching that goal and having that kind of celebration between yourselves. And then it might mean that you move on to a different priority at another time. But it's really, really important that you're not trying to tackle everything in one go, because that's unmanageable for both you in the family and your young person to take on board.
That leads us nicely on to visual prompts. Hannah has just covered some of those bits, but we're going to go into it in more detail. So as we've already covered in today's presentation, we know that anyone with ADHD can struggle greatly with time blindness, and therefore things like visual prompts and timetables can help to understand what needs to be done within a time frame and keep us accountable to make sure that we do meet those time frames. So some good ideas of visual prompts might be using smart speakers. So a lot of us at home probably have either Siri or an Amazon Alexa or even like an Echo Dot, where you can just ask that to set a reminder or an alarm, and they are absolutely amazing for that, and they will set an off alarm at that time. You can even sometimes type in what you want the alarm to be. So it will say, oh, you know, Ben, do your homework or something like that. Organisational apps. On the back of your care plan, we have already listed some really great apps, and there is also some apps on the Family Assist website, things like Habit Now, where you can send yourself daily alarms and reminders, whether that's something as simple as just to remind yourself to drink every hour, and it will set an alarm off on the hour every hour to make sure that you do that. Now and then picture charts. This can be really helpful, especially in our early years children, to actually make sure that they know what's going on, because as people we do like to know what's happening, and it helps us to be prepared for what is happening next. So it could be something like, now brush your teeth, next get your shoes on. Visual timetables can be really helpful, especially pictures. So you can actually put pictures in terms of the morning routine, whether that's just a picture of a toothbrush, socks, school bag, and that will help over time build that independence so they can do them bits for themselves. And family whiteboards are also really great, because then it's something, a habit that the family can get into, and the young person won't, or child won't feel as if they are getting singled out. And actually it can help them to know where you are and what you're doing, and it feels easier then for them to get into the habit of that. So it might be, you know, mum's got a doctor's appointment on this day, or dad's got to take the, you know, dog to the vets, but they've got to go to rugby on another day, so everyone knows what they are doing. We also know that praise is really important for any child or person, but particularly with ADHD, as especially in with our children that are hyperactive and impulsive, they can often feel that they're getting told off quite a lot for their behaviours. So praise can help them feel that they are doing something really positive. So it's about rewarding good behaviour and ignoring unwanted behaviour, but only when safe to do so. Obviously, if they're walking out into the road and that's dangerous, you are going to have to intervene. So it's about being really specific with praise and doing that immediately, as otherwise they'll forget they do it. And it could be something as simple as they bring their plate to the kitchen sink after they've eaten, and it might just be, oh, thank you for bringing your plate, or oh, well done on that maths question that you just did, or that was really kind that you shared that with your sister. And being really specific helps them to feel like they are doing really good, even no matter how small that is.
Okay, another strategy that's really useful, and schools are more aware of this now and starting to incorporate these into their daily routines. So movement breaks, but movement helps our bodies release dopamine, which indirectly helps us focus. So having that opportunity to move throughout the day can really make a difference on our ability to concentrate. Fidgeting and movement can help someone with ADHD feel more regulated. There's such a wealth of fidget toys that can be quite discreet now as well, and just be in the pocket, or even as much as a little lump of blue tack can really support in that listening in the classroom, or if they've gone to the cinema and eaten all their popcorn, then it's something else they can have in their hands if they want to continue watching a film, and it makes these sorts of things much more manageable. So just have a little think about how you might incorporate movement breaks into your young person's day. Do you go for a walk in the evening before bed, or a bike ride, or something that's more physical that can sort of burn off some excess energy, but also release good feelings within all of us? And having that opportunity to move shouldn't really be underestimated. Some of the lessons in secondary school are getting longer and longer these days, and to expect a young person to sit and concentrate for that amount of time without having that opportunity to move can be quite unrealistic. So it's thinking about what movement could you have just within the daily schedule that would help support that need for movement. And then communicating with your child. Ideally, you want to have as open communication as possible with your child, and that comes at varying levels according to what age they are and whether they're more interested in their friends or being in their bedroom and those sorts of things. But when you do have that opportunity to communicate with them, perhaps once they've had time to calm down after a busy day at school, I would say after a busy day at school, probably a young person's never in the mood to have a conversation. They need that time to sort of decompress and do something that they enjoy doing. But when you do find the right time, it's really important that you try and have minimal distractions around you. So just one-on-one time, and not space where another sibling might interrupt. Giving advance notice to transition. So if there's something going on with your child or a change of plans, just informing them with a little bit of notice can really make a difference to how they're able to accept that change. getting their attention. So that might not mean they've got to look you in the eye or be so focused on what you've got to say, but some people find that the best time to have a conversation is when you're going on a walk side by side, or doing an activity that you both enjoy, or even just going for a drive in the car. And it's not so direct that you're sort of face to face, but you can have that open discussion. Maybe pick up on the non-verbal cues. So what's your child saying to you by their facial expression or by their body language? Are they ready to start talking at this point, or do they need a bit more time and space? So again, that sort of covers the facial expression. And then perhaps giving a couple of choices. Too much choices can be really overwhelming for anybody. So perhaps limiting it just to one or two things that they have to choose from for dinner or something can be really helpful, because they're not there spent ages just trying to get to that decision point. Avoid asking too many questions at once. Sometimes we really want to know everything, and whilst we think we've got our child with us, too many questions can actually sort of end the conversation almost. And just giving time to respond, so a bit of processing time. They might not always want to talk about a tricky situation at that time, but if they know there's space to do that, they may come back to you at a later time. And as I said earlier, indirect approach often succeeds. So doing something around an activity where conversation can just come up naturally. Frequent praise allows that child to know that you've recognised the good things or the good choices that they made. And sometimes that could be in earshot of them. So rather than telling them directly, which young people can struggle to cope with, it's mentioning to someone else, or on a phone call to nan or grandma, saying, oh, I'll use Ben again. Ben had a really great day today at school, and they told me that he'd sort of helped another pupil out. Just having them in earshot of that praise can be really beneficial if they don't take it directly very well. And then modelling the way you want them to communicate. So if you're calm and regulated, then it's more likely that they can pick up on those cues as well and feel calm and relaxed to say the things that they want to say. It just makes for a much better environment when you're communicating.
We know that sleep and ADHD go hand in hand. So most children need around 9 or 10 hours of sleep a night. We know that that is not the case with a lot of our children with ADHD. They either function and thrive off a lot less, or they need a lot more. So lack of sleep and sleep disruption is really common for children with ADHD. But as we know, especially when they're younger, that doesn't just affect that child, it affects the family as well. A lot of the time we hear reports from, yourselves as parents or the children and young people, that they find it really difficult to fall to sleep. Now, often this is because, their mind is racing, they've got so many thoughts, they get distracted by just trying to fall asleep. So they settle and then they think about something else. They may only need a tiny bit of sleep and then they're waking up feeling quite energetic. So then it's really hard to get back off to sleep, even though they've only had about 2 hours. A lot of our children feel really tired, even though they've slept, because it's quite rare for them to sleep that long. And being unable to shut off busy thoughts in order for them to fall asleep. So we know that sleep can be really difficult, and once we get into a pattern of disruption, it can be really hard for them to find that nice pattern where they're getting that regular sleep. So there are some strategies that may be able to help. Now, no one size fits all, as the saying goes. So there's a lot of different strategies that are kind of trial and error, and it's about thinking about what may work for your child. So one thing, it might be exercising daily, whether that's, so you've got a little trampoline in the garden that they can bounce on for 10-20 minutes before bed, or going on an evening walk, or playing a brain game like Snap or something like that, just to try and tire their brain out. With our older children, it's a really good idea, and our young people, to try and actually think with them what their nighttime routine might look like. So they might find that actually they might want to go to bed a bit later, because actually then it's easier for them to fall asleep. It might be that they want to consider the sensory environment a bit. So for them, they might like listening to loud music to help them fall asleep, or they might like the TV as background noise, or they might like to sleep with their light on or the curtains open. And by just having these discussions, we might be able to find out things that might really help them to settle. A bedtime alarm, sometimes this can really be helpful. So it's very similar to setting an alarm for waking. So it might be that you set an alarm on the phone for 8, 9 o'clock, and then it's okay, it's time to now do the bedtime routine, which might be let's have a cup of tea, brush our teeth, and let's get settled into bed. We've already covered considering the sensory environment, but that is really handy. It might be something that, the curtains are too light, so the sun's coming through really early, which is waking them up. It might be that the room's too dark, or they can hear noises, and noises that we might not even think of. It could be a creaky tap, or someone walking on the floor and there's a creak, which just keeps waking them up. So things like using white noises or nature sounds can really help to soothe. And not all noises will work for one person. So some children might really like sort of white noises or sounds of waves, whereas other children might like heavy metal music. So it's about talking to them about what might help. We do know as well that if you have difficulties with falling asleep, the prospect of not being able to sleep can be really frustrating, and it can actually provoke quite a bit of anxiety in our young people. So it's about reducing that anxiety, whether it's sitting with them before they go to sleep, asking what they're worried about, making sure they know the plan for the next day, so they feel as prepared as they can to go to sleep. You can also find lots of sleep resources and sleep diaries online, or you can get them through your school nurse or on our Family Assist website.
So after all of that information and those strategies, I think we come to one of the most important parts, and that is the self-care for you as a parent or carer. You've battled this journey. You've probably had lots of battles along the way towards diagnosis in trying to fight for your child to get to this stage, or for others to understand them. And it's really important that you take some time for yourself as well. On a daily basis, you'll have battles to pick or decisions to make for your young person. Sorry, my laptop has gone to sleep. Sorry. Okay, sorry, I'm back. So as I was saying, time for yourself and enjoying the small pleasures. So taking some time in the garden, having a cup of tea, a bit of peace and quiet, a chance to read a book, even if it's just for 5 minutes, that can kind of restore your energy levels to sort of face the next battle and the next chore that you have to get done. So doing something to support your mental health is really important. And that could be done alone, or it could be, doing some mindfulness activities such as colouring, or, listening to music, or going for a walk and being in nature. It's really important that you care for yourself, and then you're in a better position to care for your family and the people around you. And sacrificing that little bit of time is really, really important. And you need to give yourself permission to do that, really, so that you can sort of go forward with the strength that you need for facing each day. There are lots of services available. There's huge amounts on the internet these days. Just be mindful of where you look. But what we would really recommend is the ADHD Foundation. So there's lots of really relevant information and lots of booklets and resources that you can also download, especially if you want to try and explain the condition to other family members who are not so familiar with it. There's also Mind, which can sort of look at more of the sort of mental health side of ADHD. And then we have local services in Portsmouth that are there to support. Portsmouth Parent Voice is a fantastic organisation set up by parents of neurodivergent children. And they've been through lots of these experiences as well themselves, and a really valuable resource to talk through advice or support or any difficulties that you're having. They offer drop-ins, and they offer services to talk around the ND profiling tool, which we would recommend that you continue to use even beyond diagnosis. We've got Portsmouth Family Assist website, so you'll find our neurodiversity page within that, which has lots of strategies there for the different age ranges and the different needs. The school nursing team is also a vital resource, especially people that you can approach regarding eating or sleeping concerns. So they're a really good first point of call. Send yes for your needs if you feel that your young person's needs may not be being met, or you need some advice and support around EHCPs and support in school settings. And then, as I said, we've got the neurodiversity team in Portsmouth. So we run a duty line, which is manned daily. We're not a crisis service, so we cannot get back to you straight away necessarily. But if you email into the team or phone in, we aim to get back to you within 5 working days and just talk through advice and support as is needed.
We also have some family hubs that you can book onto as well, where you can get some advice from one of our wonderful family support workers. So thank you so much for listening to today's presentation. If you would like to leave any feedback regarding this presentation or regarding the ND team and your experience, you can do so via that QR code. But thank you so much for your time, and please do get in contact if you need any support or advice. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.